Hey, so this is the second part of a level design series that I'm doing. Feel free to watch the first part here if you haven't already. I've been a bit busy working on the actual game that these levels are going to be used in, so I haven't been uploading the parts of this series as often as I should. I also know it's not the most exciting thing, doesn't get a whole lot of views, but I think it's still worthwhile to just put it out there and have as a useful reference. It's looking like this will be the last video that I put out before the game releases, and then I'll try to get the other parts uploaded after that because I'm just way too busy at the moment. But I do want to get a Godot-focused video out, hopefully next month, and that can coincide with the release of my game, so feel free to wishlist Burden of Truth if you haven't already, it would help a lot. So with all that said, feel free to subscribe if you like the content, and let's dive into this footage, which I recorded months ago. Sorry about that. Let's put some holes into the ceiling. Say like that. And then even move those up. And then from the inside, or maybe looking into it there. We can kind of grab a bunch of these and extrude up to create a little bit of a gap there. Because I have basically created a hard edge on that part, I want to add a bevel modifier, which will just smooth out. So the bevel modifier just takes any edge that it finds and splits it by creating 2 more points in its place. And I can control what that distance is or what the cutoff is for where it should create that. We'll also do that because we see the inside of this doorway. Nothing in real life is a perfect 90-degree angle, so just a bit of bevel on basically any hard surface that you can find is going to make an improvement. I use bevel a lot on many of the prop objects, almost too much, I might say. It's become a little bit of a crutch, but at this point, again, it has defined some of the look of the game, so it's important to stay consistent above all else and just keep charging forward with it. That's what I tell myself. Have to do the UVs again and then rescale it back to where it was. And then that looks a lot nicer. Let's try for plaster to get some of that plain wall, plain ceiling look. Any one of these are fine, really. Maybe this one is kind of nicer. So doing a plain wall is a little dangerous for me because it's really plain. And what I'm trying to get away from is that original burner-proof plain wall look. I mean, these were pretty detailed, but obviously in the other levels, as you saw, see this one, like, here's just a plain wall of plaster that's incorrectly tiled, and it meets up with this horrific repeating floor that's very bumpy. So I'm a little burned by my past work, and obviously I want to try to do better, so creating more varied things to look at is always a bonus. As an example, let's take a look at the defense lobby, which reused courtroom assets, but placed into the smaller scene. So here, even though there are plain walls, and obviously they have some detail to them that's a bit better, I tried to mix it up with a lot of smaller objects and pillars and things to break up the room into more discrete parts. So creating a ceiling that is just one of these plain walls means that we're going to have to break it up with more pillars, and it's a little bit tough to do on a ceiling in this kind of context. In a context like a hangar for a plane, well, it's not so tough. I can just layer on a million little pipes and support beams and stuff like that, because that's what would go on a hangar. But on a plain office wall, like, this is where 3D level design can get challenging, because what is the excuse for there to be more detail objects on a wall? In real life, there are so many, like, just flat surfaces that have nothing to break up the detail, and real life just gets away with it because it's real life, and they have ray tracing for your eyeballs. So a ceiling in a 3D level, I don't know where I'm going with this, but like, there's no justification to add more objects that would fill out the ceiling. And of course I can come up with things that can fill out the ceiling, like beams and vents, lights, sprinkler system, fire detector, but there is a balance because you don't want it to be too cluttered. These real life locations where there's just kind of nothing are potentially the most challenging to do in 3D, because your material work really has to hold up the scene. It can't just be geometry and objects. Getting a little bit off track here, but if you were to look up like sci-fi hangar 3D, you were to find some of this stuff, you could say like, wow, this is really cool and detailed, and there's a lot of like interesting geometry that's added here, and it works because, you know, in the context of a sci-fi hangar, you can have an excuse to put anything anywhere. They could be panels, there could be like railings, there could be large shapes and small shapes and all that sort of stuff that help to make the scene more detailed. I don't know, let's say you were tasked with modeling an office building. Office building room. And then, you know, this isn't gonna look good anywhere. If you were to like one-to-one make this, unless you had like, you know, modern ray tracing and like really cleaned it up, stuff like this is gonna be just much harder to make appealing. Anyways, back to the point, which is just that we're gonna have to do some work to break apart these shapes a little bit better if I'm staying with this white plain wall. But for now, let me see what I can do with this. Maybe it should be that. I was using the occlusion map by mistake. Put a normal map on it. Should not be so bumpy. Lower the smoothness down. Occlusion map. Right, so that's helped a little bit. And then I'll get maybe a large scale pattern with another occlusion map as a detail overlay. I guess something subtle, if I have to. Nope, these don't really work. Metal. So pretty... It's hard to tell. There's like two... I guess it looked a little too dirty. So I think this might be where it has to stay. Okay. I'll leave it be for now. The walls need some sort of interesting wallpaper. So I think I will go to here and see what they've got, though I don't think they'll have exactly what I need. There's no wallpaper. So there's a lot of interesting shapes in the floors section. So I could reuse one of these. Okay, so I've downloaded one of those textures and I'm going to use it here. Difference map. No, not difference, diffuse. Display. This displacement, normal and rough. So I want the diffuse. Then I'll go to this website and I use this to create normal maps and occlusion maps. So it's a little tough with this 4K texture. Just want to increase the level. Then I'll make an occlusion map just by increasing the strength and playing around with the values. Okay, and now I've got all those textures in. Let's see how it works. I called it tiles, or square tiles. This one, and this could be a problem right off the bat because they're quite quite visible. I think it looks like a like a game development testing room. I'll do some searching for another texture that's better for this. So I have found the original texture that was used in Burden of Proof. I don't think I like it. It's not quite as clean as I would have hoped. Even though it could work out here, I guess I will try to find something that's similar to this, but not exact. So I won't go completely into a new direction with this, but I will try to mimic it as best I can. Okay, I figured maybe it's best to just make my own, so I'm going to try doing that. It might not pan out, but I have a kind of an idea of how I could do this. I could make a layer there, and then I can generate noise off of this. Render fibers, no. Render clouds. And then, interesting. So right now I'm just making grunge, which is going to act as dirt. This is not the best way to tile it, but I could shift it around. So then I'll set that to soft light so that it has like barely an impact. It's like trying to hide the tiling by rotating it. That seems fine. And then, oh, it's not really tiled, is it then? Can kind of solve this by doing that. I'll merge both of these together, create another soft light, bring it down. I think to tile it, maybe I'll just erase the corners for now. And this isn't really even the important part. Oops. There, and then I guess blur it. Maybe I need to blur through here. There we go. So then it's brought more up to the edge. And of course the influence can be less. That's just the grunge part. Let's get a pattern going. So originally it was like this. Maybe I can replicate that in a cleaner way with squares. Just make a square like that. Put it kind of on the corner. Let's see. Do this and that. Increase the size. And then I'll just make kind of like some pattern that has direction like that. I'll rasterize all of those and merge them. Then I'll make another. And then to the left of it, I'll put it in the opposite direction. And then through the process of continually merging these, I'll actually I would like to offset them by 1, like here. That could be kind of cool. we'll find out. Just line these up again. You know, there could always be imperfections in the wallpaper, which means it doesn't have to be perfect. And I'm not trying to eat up too much time with texture work. That's not that exciting. And uh-oh. Okay, so yeah, I can fix this with scaling. It's gonna take some guesswork, I guess. There we go. That might be as close as I'm gonna get it. And then all of these can just become quite lucky that it lined up right at the end. It's also not too perfect, but it's good enough. I'll do that. I'll make, maybe even make this smart object. That way I can modify it with filters without having to worry about being destructive. See what it looks like when we blur it. Because it might need a bit of that to make it look more realistic. And then I might also do a drop shadow. Size down, distance down. There, now it's quite clear what's happening. Size up, distance up, opacity down. Let's do a before and after look. That does look more interesting. And then, not sure what else at this point. Maybe it's better to leave it as is for now. So I'll work with that. Maybe the blur is too much because it makes it look low resolution. There we go. Okay. So with that, you can see if this works better. And I think it does. The grunge is maybe not working for me, so let's see how it looks with it off. We'll just leave it flat like that. And actually a better way to do grunge might be just with the decal system. I don't know. Let me see if I can just put down like some splotches and then blur it like to the extreme. And then really lower the intensity so that it's just makes it not perfectly flat. Could do it again, maybe even with a different color. I am just kind of making this up at this point. Cool. That has its own issues. Maybe let's just try that. I'll keep it, but I'll just keep it really low so that you can barely perceive it. I still think it's better than nothing. And we'll range it up in a second. 2.5 seems good. The corners of these are all gonna make more sense soon. And then it's just a matter of getting the material correct. So I'd say as a low smoothness, and I'm gonna make it quite a different sort of feel. Normal map. You can just click through and find. Maybe I could even do a tile normal map. It's kind of neat, but something like this is definitely more subtle. I think I'm getting too caught up in the materials. Let's see. Get a decal on there and then... Oh. Okay, so... yeah, so one of these for sure will help a lot. I think that's pretty cool. Yeah, I think that works. So it's getting somewhere, but I know we've been stalled on something for a while, so let's refresh with some more of getting the structure down. So I do have lights that I can place here. Prop objects, I mean. Maybe it's too early for that, but we'll do it just to get a better sense of what's going on. So here in the objects, I've got generic objects. These are just some that I use across a lot of different levels, and I think they applied just fine here. I think maybe even the ceiling needs a mesh collider, just in case. So with this, it becomes pretty obvious where the light is coming from now. I put this into a ceiling holder object, and then can maybe just line them up properly. Go for 2 rows of that, and then I have another variant of this, which is with the light off. So I'll use these to fill out the space. Maybe in the future I could replace it with like a more intricate hanging light, but I don't want to draw too much attention to this part of the room. Okay, so we're going to need objects to replicate what we had here. Oop, that's not it. And we need the window. So I think most importantly, we're going to need to carve that hole into here. I'll get a loop cut in there, and then I'll just slice it up into pieces. Let's actually split out this wall from the rest of them so that I can make changes to it. I used the V key, and then that will just like separate different meshes out, both sides of the loop cut basically. So to that. Now I can make changes to just one of these things. Also, just for clarity, I'll move this wall there so that it's never intersecting. And then at this point, it's kind of guess and check. Let's move this whole window block over here. So I'm going to break down this window into 2 parts, maybe? It was 3 here in this really awkward shape. I want to make it more even. So, I don't know, maybe I'll start with just punching the hole in the wall. A good trick here is to use the bridge tool, which will just connect both edge loops together as if a window was formed, which is kind of exactly what we need. And then now I have the freedom to create shapes like that. Maybe it will be 3, but it'll just be even. Okay, and this will expose the world that's beyond there, so some work is going to have to be done to either fill that part out or just make it look believable. I could also do the same trick as render proof and just put like a white plane behind it to make it look like it's very bright and shining in, but that feels a little out of place in this game. What I'm doing now is just making the bottom part of this window, and really what would be good is to have the whole window modeled as well, like the frame of it. So I'm going to do that. I'm building it just right into this walls object, which I don't always do, but since this is kind of like a part of the wall, I think it kind of makes sense. See, I'm not using any sort of precision here. I'm just bashing the shapes together. This is where I can line things up. That's 1.37. 1.37, it's good enough. Bring it down to there, and then snap it to that. Okay, now that I've made this window shape, I can probably give it its own material. Of course, we need to unwrap the whole thing again. Then it would help if I actually assigned material. I'll just select all these objects, assign that, and then that's good. Then we're going to need the glass of the window as well. Transparency is pretty tricky to do in game engines, but for something simple like just a window that you can see through, and especially only from one side without any other windows on the other side, it should be fine. I'm going to split that into its own object, and part of the reason for that is to make sure that the sort order is correct. With anything transparent, you want to make sure that they're as separated as possible. I believe that's because depth maps are difficult. The rendering order of transparent objects can throw you off. So with them being separate objects, Unity, or whatever the rendering engine is, can potentially utilize the position of the object to determine which order it should sort in, which order it should render the transparent geometry in. Because anytime you render transparent geometry on top of other transparent geometry, it can cause weird shading artifacts. So splitting it out into its own object is just a good idea here. Call it main window. I'll tint it just so that I can see the difference. And then I'm going to name that too. And then I'm going to unwrap that, shrink it down because it's not that huge compared to everything else. And then let's see how that goes. Okay, we need to do normals again on this one. Alright, now that we have new materials, I'm going to extract them again. No, it's a little tedious, but this workflow is actually really easy to get the hang of, especially when you work directly with Blender files and you don't have to worry about import steps or anything like that. I just made changes directly to the blend file and then they just immediately appeared. And then I just had to hit up one button to relink the materials and now I can work with them again. So it's really not that bad. And you get used to it. It's again hard to tell what's going on without lights. So I'm going to make a secondary light. This one is not going to have shadows. And it's going to be more of like a mood light. So maybe I'll just call it mood light. And then I'll make it blue to kind of like offset the warm color. Maybe it'll even be like a rim light, like kind of trying to fill out the parts of the level and the characters that are not normally lighted. So like the edges of them. It's not doing much right now. I think we need more range. Yep. It's covering a large part of the room. We need more intensity. There we go. Now it's starting to pick up. And then just move it this way. Let's maybe not make it so extreme. Call it fill light blue, and because I have the bandwidth to do this, I can make yet another light on the other side and kind of fill out the opposite corners and tint it maybe red or white instead, like brown. So you can kind of see the difference in this game view. Again, that's why it was important to align the camera here so that I can see another view while I'm making changes, but with it off, you can tell that, you know, there's one light source coming in and it's from these lights that are up here, but that's not doing much for us. But with these other ones, well, the room looks a lot more alive and interesting because it's being lit from more places. It's going to take a lot of tweaking to really perfect like how this looks, and honestly I probably should be justifying why these lights are coming in. Like there should probably be a light in this room as well, and it's going to be just a careful balancing act of like how bright is everything, and because now I feel like this needs to go down in intensity. That's the basic idea. Alright, now I can see much better what I'm doing here with these materials. So let's say something that can kind of match the floor wood. I might even apply the floor wood material to this, but maybe it's better just out of principle to customize it further. It's hard to line up the view. No. No. Oh, maybe. Maybe if I tint it more to cyan to match and increase the tiling. Being more careful about which textures are selected is another bonus over burden of proof. So I want to consider this stuff more carefully in how it looks. Okay, I think this is cool. I might have chosen the same texture as the floor. 32, and this is also 32. Yeah, well, that's fine. Maybe it's better that it's the same. Let's do it even further, and then that. That looks pretty good. I could also add some grunge, and that's good enough for me. Alright, and then it's time to make the transparent window, and then hopefully we'll see the light shine through. So I'll switch the material type to transparent. Reduce down the alpha. And I mean, that's a window, but let's make it look a little more cool. I'll throw in like a concrete texture over that. Tile it a bit. Even more. And even more. And doing that just gives it a little more depth and interest. Because then it seems like there's imperfections in the window or dirt gathering up on it. This is fine, I think. And then maybe I'll just made it more opaque and then gave it a normal map, because even glass is not perfectly smooth, but you don't want to overdo it, so I just reduced it a lot. Now you can barely tell that it's there, but in extreme close-ups, if we ever get that kind of shot, then that'll be apparent. Okay, then it's time to figure out why there's no shadows. Oh, because it's set to not use shadows. So there we go. Now that I've turned on the shadows, there's a strength value. I'll leave it like that. We get a nice sun pattern coming in onto the floor from that window. Window scaling could be improved potentially. Maybe I want to bring everything up. Like that. I didn't scale it enough. Okay. Now it kind of feels like he's going to struggle to look outside. This is where it's good to enter play mode and check. That's... The window seems more correctly sized now, but it's too high up. And maybe the size was a little too extreme. Now I can select these and let's get all these window vertices and then move them down 0.8, no, 9.5. Move this down to match. Oh, we have to scale it again. There you go. It looks a little bit more realistic, I might say. So this has gone on more than I expected. I was hoping to get some objects into here and some trim items. Sometimes things happen and you get stuck on finding a good wall texture for a while, but I'm glad that I put the effort in to make it, because I'm definitely happier with this than I would be with some of the other options that I found. So let's consider this just a first step. We can maybe round this out with another deep dive to look at how I do more of the detailing options. One last thing that I want to do right now is just to set up the scene more completely with some of our lighting settings. I do have a preset here for lighting settings, which basically just turns off all of the features for light mapping, because I don't want to use light mapping. And the reason for that is because of the day-night system, which I showed a little bit or explained. When I play the game, it's actually possible for any of the scenes to become night if I use a debug button. I forgot to set the references. There's the main light, there's the fake rotate light. Now I should be able to control the time. Yeah, okay. So you can see the skybox reacting to different times of day. And you can even see like how the sun pattern moves across as the time of day changes as well. So that's pretty cool, and all the scripts and stuff have ways to control this so that you could create different story moments at different times of day using the same level. And for that reason, I don't use light mapping, because that would kind of just bake in lights from one direction, and I would prefer to have that amount of control. It's also more tedious and more heavy on my computer, or at least it was when I had a worse computer, so I just never got into the habit of doing it. And just going full real-time, you know, not the most performant, but it does simplify things a lot on my end. That handles that, but as you might have noticed, every time there's a big change, the environment takes a little bit to update. And that's because there's reflection probe work happening in the background. By default, Unity will just place a probe just wherever it wants. I think maybe at 0, 0, and just take a picture of everything that's going on and use that as a... Oh, that's a light. And just use that as the source to draw reflections from. But we want more control. So we're going to make our own reflection probe. We'll call this the main probe. And I'll place it where I think is best for capturing reflections, which for this room would be just the center of the room. Put it into the lighting tab. We'll change the resolution to 512. And then I'll increase the size. Oops. So that it captures everything. Actually, even more, because I might have background objects that'll go here later. I don't want to forget about that. So just everything in this zone is going to be captured by the probe. I'll make sure I save and then bake. And we'll see what it does. It has just taken a picture of all of the static geometry that we've made, and then it's going to use that in a cube map, so that when objects need to ask for reflection data, they go to this probe because they're inside the bounds of this probe. So what that's done is that's basically darkened off these corners that used to be very bright, and that's because previously the probe was just taking a picture of the sky. But now that we have our own probe and we can position it correctly, a picture from inside this room is going to end up a lot darker, and therefore when these corners of the walls reflect, they're going to be a lot darker than they were. You can see the before and after. So all of these like blue tinted edges, that's coming from the smoothness value of the material, and the smoothness value of the material is picking up the closest reflection that it can find. But when this is the closest reflection, well, suddenly it looks a lot more realistic, because the picture that it's taken is not capturing the bright sky outside. So that'll be the end of this part. You can see how far we got. Although there's more objects in this scene, you can tell that we're on a much better path to creating a really cool looking level in the end. So yeah, I hope this was insightful. I hope it was interesting. Plenty more to do, but I'm glad that I recorded this process. I think it helps a lot to figure out the steps and to just really solidify what I'm doing and how this game is going to distinguish itself from the previous entry. So I hope you liked that. Hope this was cool, and let me know what you thought in the comments. Feel free to subscribe. Thank you so much, and thanks for playing.